Hello everyone, I am open to week 4 where we will be covering chapter 3, Sensation and Perception. Here is the to-do list for the week. I just want to make sure that everyone is really listening to these podcasts and not skipping over them because they're vital in that I often give information about the week coming up, any changes to the syllabus, and any other key tips that you need to know for covering the material for the week. So right away, we're going to jump into the objectives for the chapter. Now, we're covering sensation and perception, and that's roughly how the chapter is divided into 2 parts. The first part covering your senses, and the second part covering perception. So, of course, you're going to be introduced to information about sensory thresholds. At what point do we experience the stimuli in our environment, in what manner that it's coming in, whether it be visual or auditory or touch or even pain. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then what the brain does with that information. So what information does it store? What information gets ignored? And it kind of give you like an overview behind that. Then it gets a little more detailed in walking you through the eye, the structure and anatomy of the eye, as well as how we see light and how light travels through the parts of the eye. We'll take a look at some of the theories on color and color blindness. And then it will go into auditory processes. So looking at, again, the anatomy of the ear, how we perceive sound, how sound travels through the various parts of the ear, and then how the brain processes information about sound, like pitch or tone. And there's theories on this. So we'll be taking a look distinctly at 3 theories about how the brain processes information about pitch. And then some discussion that's a little more applied on why some people are unable to hear. So we'll look at deafness and the ways that hearing can be improved based on what we know about it. We'll then move into taste and smell, and then as well touch, which includes discussion on pressure, temperature, and pain. And then kind of capping it all into then, now that we know about all these sensory processes, what do they tell us about our position and movement in space, right, of our bodies in our environment? And then the very last portion of the chapter will cover perception, looking at some theories on perceptual constancies as well as Gestalt principles for how we experience our world. And so how we take all of the sensation information and turn it into interpretation, how we perceive what's happening. Talk a lot about sight in terms of monocular and binocular cues, which are perceptual cues for us to determine, everything from 3D to, what is possible in our world and what is not possible. So it gets into a little bit of discussion on illusions, which everyone finds really fun and interesting. And I'll provide some examples in the lecture slides about some of those. You'll get to work through those and do some of the little tasks that have you look at visual illusions, and all of those in which can influence and alter your perception. So that's a good overview of the chapter. Your lecture slides are attached here. And again, those lecture slides often walk you through different exercises. So I suggest that when you're viewing the lecture slides, you view it in presenter mode. So it's a PowerPoint. And if you view it in presenter mode, it will let you do the little mini experiments that are embedded within. And then additionally, I would view it in notes mode, so that you can see the notes that are attached to each slide. So the notes often elaborate on points on the slide. And again, it really is just an extension of the reading. So nothing that you find in the chapter slides is not also in the book. Okay, so it really is meant to build off of the book. And I try to stay pretty true to that. But definitely the slides give you a little more direction, and again, some little tasks that you can do It often will direct you to videos, all of which are the same videos that you'll find in the episodes in my Psych Lab. So this week you're looking at episode 5, Sensation and Perception. And so the lecture slides embed some of those videos, not all of them, but a few. So in order to get all of them, you want to go into the video toggle button and view the videos for the chapter. I've included the cite as you write instructions just as a reminder that as you're working on your discussion posts for the week, I really want you paying attention to how you're citing. So you'll be citing from Hawk, right? The reading is Hawk number 5. It's called Take a Long Look, and it comes from Fance's research on preferential looking behavior in infants, and how we go about deciphering what infants gravitate towards looking at, how we measure that, and what that tells us. It will also include some discussion on research methodology. So it will kind of harken you back to chapter 1 where we talked about experimental and correlational designs. And here's where I want you in the discussion to branch out. I want you to actually design a study that examines a current research question that you come up with about infant perception. Okay, so after you read the study from Fance about what infants prefer to look at and how do we know what they prefer to look at, I want you to come up with an original question that we might ask today based on infant perception. Okay, so you're going to come up with a question and you're going to design a study, and I want your study to be either an experimental one or a correlational one. So this may require you to go back into chapter 1 where it discusses those experimental and correlational designs, and make sure that you're using the right language. Make sure that if you're choosing an experimental design that you're talking about all of your variables that would be included. You'd want to be mentioning random assignment, who would your subjects be, what would your groups be, so your experimental group, your control group, and then what would your variables be? So what would you be measuring, your dependent variable, and what would you be manipulating between the groups as your independent variables, right? So that's if you pick an experimental design. If you pick a correlational design, again, you're coming up with a research question, but then, in a correlational study, you are finding the association between things, okay? So just keep in mind, whatever your question is, what is the best design that you could propose to answer that research question? And that's really what number 3 is all about. So your discussion posts this week are going to involve a little bit more in-depth research and integration of the chapters. So you'll be using the Hawk reading, but you'll also be using chapter 3 of the Cicerelli White Book, taking what you know from sensation and perception and kind of building it into your answers to these questions. And then you'll also be touching on some concepts from chapter 1. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Aside from that, we just have the quiz this week covering chapter 3, and that will conclude the week. Please let me know as you're working through things this week if you have any questions. And again, make sure that you're looking at my feedback from the discussion posts. I know I posted an announcement about that, but you want to be going back into your discussion posts from week 3 and see not only what you got, but did I have any comments for you? That requires you actually going back into the thread of the discussions where you can see me commenting on what you wrote. It also involves you going into the grade book where it says My Grades and clicking into your grade on a particular discussion where I might also have some more comments for you. Okay? So again, please just let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a good week, everybody.